Wherever your day takes you, Jesus is among us. And I don't know about you, but that's an encouraging truth that I don't always feel. There are times that my life doesn't feel like Jesus is with me in the midst of difficulty or in the midst of trials or suffering. And perhaps you can relate. Maybe you wonder where Jesus is in the midst of a situation at work or at home, or maybe just as you sort out what's next in your own life, you wonder, where is God in this season? That's a question we wrestle with, especially as we see the chaos of the world around us. It feels like we're one decision away from our life being a wreck. Now, you may know someone who's made decisions that would cause their life to be a wreck. But there are sometimes I see decisions people make that I'm not sure why they ever would have made. And this is one of them. I see that guy, and I just wonder what possessed him to get in that thing. Other than the fact that it looked fun or whatever, that makes my heart beat fast to think about being in that spot. I do not like it. Hopefully, that's not a decision you've made. Or I wonder what these guys were thinking. Could this possibly be the best disguise they could find? And did they not watch Home Alone to know that the wet bandits got caught and charged with all the crimes? I don't understand why people do what they do. And when it's things like this, it's easy to go, okay, that's funny. And I'm just glad I'm not that ignorant, right? But there are also times that the decisions that we make take us to the brink in our own lives of wondering if we're actually going to be able to redeem the situation, if we're actually going to be able to come out on the other side of the situation whole. In our own lives, it's important for us to remember that the decisions we make and the way we build our lives matters. In fact, today I have this thread I want to pull through with you. And the thread is this: your foundation determines your future. I believe that what we choose to build with and what we choose to build on determines where we end up in our lives. And what we will see along the way today is that there are two kinds of people in the world. There are the wise and there are the foolish. And if we want to come out on the side of the wise, it means that we order and that we build our lives in a certain way. And so today we jump into this new series called Jesus Among Us. If this is your first time or your first time in a long time, I'm especially glad that you're here. My name is Ryan. I'm one of the pastors here at the Summit, and today we're going to spend some time walking through a story that Jesus told. And it's a story that comes out of a book. So this series is about the Bible, of course, but we're using a book to guide us, showing us our pace that we go through these stories. And the book is called Jesus Among Us. It's a 90-day devotional that's a partner with Jesus with us, the one that we just did through the Christmas season. And each of these 90-day journeys is taking us through the entirety of the Gospels in chronological order: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, in the order in which the events unfolded. And not just for the sake of getting on the other side and saying, look what I did, but for the sake of better understanding how Jesus lived among the people, the work he did, the life he lived, the miracles he performed. And we see all this, and it becomes clear to us. What quickly becomes evident is the character of God that is always present, and the encouragement that we have to live lives that honor him. And so I pray that you will follow along with us in this series. Now, you can do it by showing up on Sunday mornings. I hope you will. You can do it by grabbing the book, the Jesus Among Us book. We have some at Next Steps, out the doors to your right when you leave today. Or you can just pick up the reading plan and you can just read the scriptures along with us. But here's what I think you'll find. Every day you'll be encouraged and you'll see a snippet of Jesus interacting with other people, and your heart will be encouraged and you'll gain some new information about how you might live a life that honors God. So today, Here's my hope. My hope is that we're going to jump in and look at some words of Jesus. And I will have a chance to share with you some things that he said that give us direction on the way that we should live. But I don't want to just have you leave here with knowing something more. I hope you leave here with something helpful. You walk out the doors thinking, I can do this to be the kind of person that I want to be. I can do this to take a step on my spiritual journey. And so today, just right off the bat, if you've been at church for a long time, you're going to recognize this story. If you haven't been to church before, you're going to know the principles of this story because they play out in our lives time after time. So today we're going to be in Matthew chapter 7. If you have your Bible, you're going to want to get there. If you don't have your Bible, you might want to Google it or pull it up somewhere. This is a great passage of scripture to take some notes on. There's very specific, direct things that Jesus gives us about how we can live. And hey, if you have the Bible app, you can go to Matthew chapter 7. You can look at the scripture today, and you can download a screensaver or a background to remind you of this truth throughout the course of the week. It is that practical. It is that good. This is Matthew chapter 7, verse 24. I'm going to read phrase by phrase through this first verse, and then I'm going to pull it all together for us and share some helpful steps with you. So we're going to begin with less than a phrase, actually. We're going to begin with one word. Here it is, Matthew 7:24. Jesus says, anyone. And I love this word. I love starting here, and I love pausing to actually give this word the attention that it deserves, because the word anyone in the Greek meant anyone or anything. So it is all-encompassing. It allows for anyone who is near to hear. It allows them to engage and be a part. The great thing about the message of Jesus is that it's not just for a specific person or type of people. You don't have to know or be engaged already. There's not a special knowledge that you have to have. You don't have to be in the clique or the clan or whatever it is. The message that Jesus gives us is for everyone, which means that if you walked in today and it's your first time, and maybe you're unsure about faith, and you're not sure how you want to think about the teachings of this guy named Jesus, you're like, what do I do with this? Here's the thing. You don't have to believe everything he says to think that there's value in what we're learning today. This principle can help us move forward, whether you're a person of faith or if you're a person exploring faith. This message is for anyone. And Jesus continues, anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it. I love how specific and direct Jesus is when he's telling this particular portion of the story. He tells us that it's not really enough just to be around it. It's not enough to absorb it by osmosis. Your significant other or your friends are not going to be able to do this for you. Taking notes is a good place to start, but then you've got to act on it. He says, if you want to do this, if you want to be engaged with this, it's going to require something of you. It's not just going to happen because you hear the words today. It's something that you hear, and then you have an opportunity to do. And this idea is so important that Jesus' brother actually talked about this as well. Imagine being the brother of Jesus. You want to talk about being the not favorite child, okay? So there's James, the brother of Jesus, and he does his own thing leading the Jerusalem church, and he writes a book, or he writes a letter that gives instruction about the way we should live. And here's what James says in James 1:22. He says, but don't just listen to God's word. You must do what it says. Otherwise, you are only fooling yourselves. In other words, to hear it and then to just assume that you've become it, or that you've done it, is not taking the step to make it a reality in your life. So to hear the truth and to do the truth are incredibly important, and they lead us to a very specific place, Jesus says. Anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise. We can't agree on much these days. Have you noticed that? I don't know if you saw this week, but 2 world leaders met in the Oval Office, and it devolved into petulant toddlers arguing about who said what when. And the fact that we have world leaders who can't simply agree that peace is important enough to work toward and to embrace at some level is a problem in our world. We have 2 leaders who can't even agree that peace is valuable enough to make the focal point of the effort. Instead, there have to be other things that come along with it. And I'm not making a political statement. You may support what President Trump said, and you may support what President Zelensky said. Whatever you think about those things, it simply highlights for us that we are a people who can't agree about much. And as much as we disagree, here's something I hope that we can agree on today. Wisdom is better than foolishness. Doing the wise thing, doing the right thing is better than doing the foolish thing or the wrong thing. Now, I'll let you take that and extrapolate that onto the situation in Ukraine and all the other situations of your life. That's your work to do. But being a person who is wise requires something of us. It requires this. I don't know if you know how to change a tire, but I do. My son had a flat tire on his car, and so we got it to the parking lot. We pulled it up. Do you have a picture of the car? There we go. On looking at this picture, there may be more wrong than the tire. I don't know, but we decided we were going to change the tire, and I know how to change a tire. I've done it before. Here's what you do. In order to change a tire, you first make sure that you have a spare tire, and then you make sure the spare tire has air in the tire. Those are very important things. I learned that lesson the hard way. That's a freebie today, not spiritual, but incredibly practical. File that away. So you make sure that you have a tire, and then you get out the jack, and you make sure that your jack is sufficient to jack the car up, and then you make sure that you know where to place the jack. Here's another freebie. Make sure you put it in the right spot. I have a friend in high school who has a hole in his floorboard because of how the car was jacked up. So you're going to want to make sure the jack is in the right spot. And then you just jack the car up, right? Like you do the thing and the car goes up and you're like, oh, great, the wheel's off the ground. Now I can take the tire off. And so you get out the 4-way lug wrench or whatever. If you have the cheap thing like we did, it's like this long and it's not long enough. But you put it on there and you start trying to undo the lug nuts. And the goal is to take off all the lug nuts so you can remove the tire. Are you with me? Have you done this? And then we get the tire off. The goal is to take the new tire that you've confirmed has air in it and put it on there and to put all the lug nuts back on. And then suddenly you have gone from having a flat tire to having a tire that works, and you lower the car and you drive away and you live happily ever after. I know how to do that, but I did not. I called AAA, and I had AAA come and do it for me. See, there's a difference between knowing and doing. And if we want to be wise, if we want to reap all the benefits that are available to us in our lives, we have to be people who go beyond knowing the truth, and we have to become people who are willing to do the truth. AAA came to my rescue. And what I know is that when I listen and I follow, I'm able to get the tire changed. So what does it look like? Here's Jesus paints a picture for us in Matthew 7:24. This wraps up the verse. He says, anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise, like a person who builds a house on solid rock. Now, I'm not sure how many house builders we have among us, but you don't have to build homes to know that this is true, because you've probably built with blocks or Legos, haven't you? You know that if you're going to build a tower with blocks or Legos, that you need to have a strong base. It needs to be wider at the bottom than it is at the top. You need to make sure that when the foundation is built, that it is sufficient to hold the weight of the tower that you're going to build. You've lived this out in your own life, and you may not have even known it. If you get the foundation wrong, you can forget about the building. And that's the reality that's unfolding in front of us. And it's true with childhood toys, and it's also true in other areas of our life. Here's how Jesus continues. Though the rain comes in torrents, and the floodwaters rise, and the winds beat against the house, it won't collapse, because it's built on bedrock. Now, this message would have landed really nicely on the ears of first century men and women. They would have heard what Jesus said, and they would have been encouraged because they would have known exactly what he is referring to. Israel essentially has two seasons, a wet season and a dry season. And during the dry season, it doesn't rain much, and in the wet season, it rains a lot. But even in the rainy season, when it's raining regularly, there are torrential downpours where it rains so hard and so fast and so furiously that some of the terracing on the hills is washed away, that the most fertile soil on the plains disappears, and that the foundations of houses erode because the rains come so hard and so fast that everything is destroyed. And so if it's true that your foundation determines your future, it should change the way we order our lives so that they're able to stand up against difficulty that might come. See, the foundation is crucial because it holds the weight of the structure, and yet we're people who have become so enamored with building something that's pretty or building something quickly that we don't often do the hard work of building a foundation that will stand the test of time. If you're a math or philosophy person, you'll appreciate what Jesus does here next, because what follows is a contrapositive statement. In other words, what follows is Jesus saying the same thing again, but this time in the inverse. He's underscoring the truth of the first statement by stating it in the opposite manner. Here's what he says, Matthew 7, 26 and 27. But anyone who hears my teaching and doesn't obey is foolish, like a person who builds a house on sand. When the rains and floods come and the winds beat against the house, it will collapse with a mighty crash. There's something to be said for building in a way that it can stand the test of time. Now, you've lived this out at some point, more than likely, if you've ever gone to the beach. Missouri people like to go to the beach to be near the water, and part of that is building sandcastles. Have you ever built a sandcastle? I love the process of building a sandcastle because it gets you out in near the water, having fun, all that stuff. You get the buckets and the shaping things and the shovels, and you build the sandcastle. And here's what you do. Since you're from Missouri, you want to be as close to the water as possible, and so you build it where the water is not quite yet, right? So it's been there before, but it's not there now, and so you build what you're going to build. And so you build the sandcastle, and it's not as cool as you think it is, and it took longer than it should have, and all that stuff, but you've got this sandcastle, and eventually the water starts to come up. Have you seen this happen? And when the water begins to make it up to the sandcastle, there's one solution that will buy you time. You dig a moat around the sandcastle. Every castle needs a moat. It works out perfectly. You make this trench, the water comes in. You can make the water even funnel back out. It is lovely. And that may buy you a little bit of time. But the reality is, when you come back in the morning, the sandcastle is going to be gone. Why? Because it was built on a foundation of sand, where water erodes, where things that come up against it destroy it, instead of being built on a firm foundation. See, Jesus isn't really talking to us about sandcastles and houses. You get that, right? Jesus is talking to us about the way that we have built our lives. Remember, your foundation determines your future. A strong foundation can withstand the storm, and a weak foundation doesn't stand a chance. So if choosing the proper foundation is important, and if Jesus says that wisdom is building on the solid rock, it begs a question of us, which is, what foundation are you building on? Perhaps the best way to answer this question, just for yourself, is where do you turn when life gets hard? When it feels like things are not going well, when it's not turning out as you hoped, or your plan is not coming to fruition, or you get the phone call that changes everything, where do you turn? See, I've been around long enough to know that there are really good Sunday school answers to that question, and there are also real answers to that question. And for most of us, as much as we would like to say with conviction and complete honesty that our foundation is found in the truth of Jesus, the reality for us is that often our foundation is found in success and in security. We know that despair can't last long because we're successful people. We've got the degree, we've got the certificate, we've got the title. We've got the network on LinkedIn to help us find the next thing, whatever it is. We know that success is just around the corner for us, or maybe we just need a little bit of security, and we find our security in the fact that since we were 22 years old and we got our first job, we've been paying into our 401k, and the money's been growing, and the money's always been there. And we've taken precautions, and we bought life insurance to take care of our family in the event that something unexpected should happen. But remember, your foundation determines your future. With safety and security, as long as everything's okay, everything's okay. And those things are not inherently bad, but if you built your life on them, you're going to have struggles when storms come because careers change and loved ones get sick and money dries up. If your life isn't built on a firm foundation, it will come tumbling down. And the hardest part about all of this is that you may not even know where your foundation is until that moment, until that really hard time in your life. And so the question for us is, how do we begin to build a foundation that we know is centered on Jesus and that we know will stand the test of time? And so today, I just want to give you two quick things as we wrap up. And they're two application points. They're the helpful nuggets that I hope you'll take out into your week. And here's the best news. They're not even from me. They're from Jesus, the reminder of what Jesus said in Matthew 7:24. Anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise, like a person who builds a house on solid rock. To be wise is to build on the rock of Jesus Christ. So, what does it look like? Build your house on the rock. Two things. Number one, listen for God's voice. Listening for God's voice means that we're willing to ask ourselves what God might be saying and to hear it even if it's not what we wanted to hear. Have you ever asked someone something hoping that they would give you the answer that you were looking for? We do that with God so often, don't we? It's like, God, I really think that I'm meant to buy this lottery ticket that's going to have $1 million winner on it. God, please make that the case. And you buy the ticket and you don't win and you're mad at God because God didn't fulfill the promise that you sort of imposed upon him. That's not how this works. Listening to God means that we slow down, we pause long enough to hear what God might say to us, even if it's something we don't like. Even if it's countercultural, even if it goes against our intuition, even if it asks us to do or live or be differently, we've put ourselves in a position to hear what it is that God might say to us. It's a place of complete humility. And I've been around long enough to know that when I talk about hearing God's voice, people are like, an audible voice from heaven. I think that might be mental illness. I'm not sure that that's spiritual. And so just let me tell you how you might position yourself to hear that voice. Number one is this: get in the Word. Open the Scriptures and read them. See what God might be saying through His Word. And number two, the second thing you can do is to pray continually, which means that you're positioning yourself to hear constantly. Praying continually might be driving with your radio off in your car. It might be getting up early to enjoy the stillness of your house. Whatever it is, it's putting yourself in a position to hear what it is that God might want to say to you. The first thing to build on solid rock that Jesus tells us is to listen. The second thing is to follow Jesus. I don't know if you know how great the staff at the Summit Church is, but I can tell you the staff at the Summit Church is top-notch. Every person here loves Jesus. They're working really hard. And that doesn't happen by accident, actually. We work hard to make sure that that's the case. And so every year, every person on our staff sets goals that they want to achieve. And they meet with their manager regularly to see if those goals are being met. We actually sit down and we walk through their objectives and their key results. We're like, how are we doing? This one's in the red zone. How can we get this to move a little bit? I do this every month with church council. I show them my goals. We have a conversation about where we are. They are my boss. That's the way this should work. Well, this week I sat down and I took a look at one of the objectives of someone who's on our team. And it's someone you know. His name is Pastor Jesse. And as I was reading his objective, I actually laughed out loud. So I thought I'd share it with you today. Here's what he wrote. He said his goal is to make a list of books to read through the year, 5 to 6 books. And I love that. I think that is a great thing to do. I think everyone should read. I think you should read stuff that's fun. I think you should read stuff that's informational. I think you should read stuff that's inspiring. I think you should do all of that. But what Jesse wrote next I thought was the most incredible part. He said this, and read them. Because I don't know about you, but I've made goals and not done anything with them. That's the difference between following and listening. That's the difference between knowing and doing. When we get in this place where we're actually willing to take in the spiritual truth and to live it out, this is the place where we're living a life of wisdom. And I know it can be hard. I know it can be hard because sometimes it seems fruitless. Sometimes it seems challenging. Sometimes you don't have all the answers that you wish that you had. And I want to encourage you to continue to fight through, to be the kind of person who builds your life on the solid rock that is Jesus. See, here's the thing. There are lots of different ways to live. But Jesus teaches us that ultimately there are two types of people. There are the wise and there are the foolish. And when your life gets difficult, it will become clear where you have built your life. Have you built it on the rock or have you built it on the sand? And here's what we know to be true. When you listen to and follow Jesus, you are building a life on the rock, a life that will stand the test of time. And where you choose to place your trust, what you choose to build your life with, what you choose to build your life on, will eventually become clear to everyone around you. Because this is true, that your foundation determines